we can start.
Right. So, hi everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining this event. My name is Ajay from Talk 30 to Me. The topic for today's discussion is going to be coastal resiliency. Coastal resilience is the ability of a community to bounce back after natural hazards like hurricanes and coastal storms. The necessity to strengthen this coastal resilience on a global scale is becoming essential as climate change is causing these hazardous events to become more frequent and intense. Some ways of achieving this include integrating nature-based solutions for erosion and sea level rising, as well as resilient infrastructure into coastal management strategies. Nature-based solutions
Ajay,
rely,
I'm
yeah?
so sorry to interrupt you, but are there some slides or something which you're not
No,
sharing? Okay.
no.
Sorry.
Nature-based solutions rely on natural processes and features to sustainably manage ecosystems and are gaining ground in contemporary environmental strategies. We shall learn more about this during the webinar. These emerging solutions will be discussed along with our esteemed guests, Carly Lovis and Sarita Fernandez. So now there are slides. Just give me a sec. I'm sharing my screen.
Sir.
Carly is a marine ecologist currently pursuing her master's in climate and security at Columbia University in New York City. She intends to work at the nexus of science, industry, and policy to create more robust and resilient coastal communities. Her work with Talk 30 to Me has led her to incorporate concepts of social justice into her ocean and climate work and push for rapid transformation in the climate crisis. Thank you for joining us today, Carly. Our other guest today is Sarita Fernandez. She's a maritime risk resilience researcher. Sarita Fernandez is a coastal and maritime policy scholar, specifically with her work on land use of coastal zones, ocean governance, and resource management of maritime zones and stakeholder equity into politics. She studies conflict resolution in coastal land use, marine resource management, conservation, and case studies of conflict within ocean economy sectors. Thank you very much, Sarita, for also joining us. Now we will proceed with presentations from both of our speakers, followed by a Q&A session. So yeah, go ahead. The floor is yours. I think Sarita is going first. All right, so go ahead, Sarita.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Ajay, for that introduction. So I and Carly would be presenting some of our work that we've done in coastal resilience, and I'll just pull up my screen. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys about coastal resilience, and the picture behind these words is actually a picture of a beach in India, and this is a big sand dune, and this is one of those main coastal barriers that we know of, like mangroves, like rocky beds, like seagrass forests. And so sand dunes with all the vegetation is also one type of natural barrier to flooding. But before we understand coastal resilience and what does this mean, we will break it down into a few very easy things because we have limited time, and also we don't want to make it too boring for you guys. So basically, we're going to break it down into what is coastal feasibility, which I also call as coastal common sense. What is policy? We've heard of this word, in the back of our mind, but what is this policy? And if any of you are from Mumbai or from Gujarat or from Kerala or Goa, you guys, or even in any part of the country, you guys must have heard of something known as Cyclone Tauktae that happened sometime last year. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Cyclone Tauktae and what we learned from that cyclone. So the coastal feasibility thing, what I call as coastal common sense, essentially, is basically what is feasible. which means what is possible on a coast. How much of it do we understand, or how much of what we envision that we can, sort of construct on a coast, or we can do on a coast. Like it could be tourism, it could be fishing, it could be uh, infrastructure development, it could be roads, and so how, or just like some resorts that you would want to go to. And so how much of this is actually feasible, and how much of this lies within the common sense zone that I call. So what do I mean by this? So this is technically how a coast is divided. In scientific literature, when you're trying to understand zones, in policy, when you're trying to understand zones, and also in social scientific literature when it comes to communities of how they understand coastal zones. So you have the high tide line, which is the first line, which is the highest mark at which the water would reach at at like, when there's a full moon, or when there's a neap tide or a spring tide. And that's the highest mark at which the water would reach your beach, or your rocky shore, or your mangroves. So this would be the highest point, and that we mark as the high tide line. When you come a little down towards the sea, you reach the low tide line, and this is the lowest where the sea would like retract, would go back, and the amount of land or the amount of coast you would have left for you. And the area between this is called intertidal. When you move, you get something known as a subtidal. Now, in the subtidal region, you usually find all of your coral reefs. You find your seagrass beds. If anybody knows about scuba diving and stuff like that, all of that happens mostly within the subtidal region, and sometimes even beyond it, but mostly it all happens within the subtidal region. And when you move towards it, you reach the deep ocean. And the ocean, which is 70% of our planet, which is the biggest habitat of planet Earth, basically sort of decides the climate. It decides the impacts on these coastlines. It determines how much of an impact it will have. So every monsoon, the energy from these impacts is very high. And so the ocean is very essential when it comes to planning, or when it comes to understanding what a coast is. Now, to explain resilience to you guys, because most of you from are children, I will try giving an example. So basically, when you give an exam and you get less marks, okay, and you come back with your low mark report card, and your parents shout at you, what is the next thing you tell them? I'll just allow 2 tries. So anybody can unmute and tell me, what would you tell your parents if you get less marks in a particular exam and you show them your report card?
There are some replies in the chat.
Hard work.
Hard work, right? Hard work. And so then you will consistently work. And did somebody else unmute their mic? Okay. So Saksham, you will put in hard work. So that determination to put in hard work is called your resilience, that you will resolve to work harder and score better. And so this is when imagine you are the coast, and so you want to be more resilient. That is, you want to do a better job at what you are designed to do. And you want to, you don't want to like be destroyed. You don't want to not do the things that you were originally designed to do. So hard work, and you want to be better at it. So that is like you resolve to do something better. And that is how we basically understand what resilience is. And okay, yeah. And so this is a little bit more technical. And so basically, this is how we understand the zones. The part of the beach that you see comes within a very small portion called land. And then the rest of the sea is divided into these many areas. So you have the baseline, which is all your beaches and all your picnics and all your photographs that you see. It's such a tiny portion of it is part of the sea. Then you have your contiguous zones, and then you have the high seas. I'm not going to explain what an exclusive economic zone is and stuff, but in the second diagram, if you can see, this is how tiny the coast is. and how important that green part of the coast becomes, because it is part of the tiny portion. And this green little part, this tiny little portion, protects all the community. So everybody who stays in a coastal city, for example, these pieces of land, or these geomorphological features, which is like mangroves and trees and rocky shores and sand dunes, protect you from this vast big arena of ocean that's present, which comes time and again. So this is what a coastline is basically, and this is what we know it is supposed to, I guess, look like when it comes to, say, you want to go to Goa and you imagine only tourism and beach beds and, you know, five-star hotels and stuff like that. And this is basically all made like on an area that possibly once looked like this. So this area probably looked once upon a time like this. And then because we were not well aware enough, or we did not like have that much scientific advancements, we did not know the value of this. And that constructing on this would eventually mean this. And so the next time a cyclone or a storm or, you know, a hurricane comes by, this is what it would do to those very structures where they were supposed to be full of, you know, these natural barriers of mangroves and stuff like that. And then we constructed a lot of concrete on it. And so when the next disaster comes, and we're going to see like an accelerating surge in this because of climate change and so on, this is what is going to keep happening. We are going to keep seeing the loss of homes, the loss of people's livelihoods, and massive economic damage per se. So what do we do? So basically in India, there's a policy called the Coastal Regulation Zone Notifications. And this is a little technical for, you know, for people who are in this space like me, who research on the coastline and other related areas. And we've seen how this policy first started off to be like an absolute protection measure. So it said, we will protect the coast, we will protect every beach, every mangrove from 500 meters from a high tide line. But then because we had the boom of, you know, privatization and liberalization, and we wanted more industry to come in, and we wanted more private sector players to come in, we started easing these regulations because they said they needed the coast to do A, B, C activity on it. Then the indigenous fishers, which is your tribals, your fishers, they were like, we are already living here, and our children live here, and our schools are over here, and our villages are over here. So what will happen about those things? And so a lot of pushback, a lot of, voices came from these coastal communities. And then our country made a new policy, which was better, which included all their concerns, which included equity. And they also made sure that the coast was protected, it was better understood. But we did continue seeing violations from private sectors because they knew that this is how a coastline is supposed to be used. They did not understand the meaning of, like, if we take away some of the natural flood protection barriers, what will it do to the coastline? And so now we have another policy, which then again removed all these protection measures and stuff like that. So what does this mean basically for us right now? We've seen it during Cyclone Tauktae. So this happened last year, somewhere in between May to, I think, in mid-May sometime. And we've seen how it started from the Arabian Sea, and then it went on and on and on the entire West Coast, right up to Gujarat. And it caused damages of up to 14,000 crores to the entire west coast of India. So all the coastal states lying here were heavily damaged, and they were heavily damaged because we learned a couple of things that happened during it. One of the things we learned was that our houses, our roads, our hospitals were not cyclone proof. So for example, we've heard of earthquake proof infrastructure, but none of the infrastructure was resilient, or none of the infrastructure was cyclone proof. And whether it was in villages or in cities, none of this was present. The second thing we did was we did not do a risk assessment of such coastal infrastructure. We did not see that if I build a road too close and a cyclone comes in, a cyclone will come and hit this thing, what will happen to this road? We just wanted a road, so we built a road, but we did not understand that after building this road, with climate change and with the sea level rising and rising and rising, will we be able to even use this road? And so now that we have these roads, unfortunately, and stuff like that, we also have to look at building capacity, because not just these roads exist, but probably there's a hospital here, and probably there's a shelter over here. And so we can't like demolish all of this. We have to look at how do we build capacity. So governments and departments are talking on how to probably reforest these areas with mangroves, on how to raise the height of these things, on how to use technology like drones and other, new innovations that are coming up to build capacity for this critical infrastructure. The other thing that we have realized is nature really works. We've seen time and again that nature has worked. Nature has proved scientifically, and with all the old knowledge, the traditional knowledge that our grandparents gave us, that nature does work. It did make sense in when we seen cyclone Tokte hitting the entire west coast. But unfortunately, what we discovered was that there was no policy protection to these natural flood protection barriers. We have the CRZ policy, but that has a very limited scope. So if there's nothing protecting, like we have some policy maybe protecting trees and tigers and stuff like that, but if you have no policy protecting coastal forests like mangroves or seagrass beds or coral reefs, how are they going to do their function? How are they going to act as natural flood protection barriers and protect us from climate change disasters? The translation of these nature-based solutions into private sectors and coastal infrastructure projects. So basically, if say my father wants to build a resort at the beach in Goa, he is not concerned about climate change because he doesn't know about this, or he doesn't understand that if he destroys a sand dune and builds a resort on it, that his resort is eventually going to go in the sea in probably the next 5 years. And so this translation that nature-based solutions are important. And so probably I need to build my resort behind the sand dune, a little far away, so that that becomes my natural barrier when a storm or a cyclone comes, does not translate into the private sector or the private industry. And that is something I think we need to work on collectively. We all know about...
Sarita, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but somebody is annotating on the screen. I would like to request them to stop doing that. Do not annotate on the screen, and yeah, please maintain decorum.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so we know about COP26 and the IPCC and United Nations SDGs and Sustainable Development Goals. And so they have given us a 12-year window, a 12-year time period, where they have said in these 12 years, we have to fix and we have to build more adaptability and more resilience to actually face climate change and to actually do better. So in these 12 years, we have our technology, we have interests, we have awareness. We use all of that and we get back, we restore what we've lost, and we use technology to monitor how much of this can be successful. Because we do have the technology, and India is pioneering into science and technology in this space, in the world, in fact. And I think one of the most important things that we do across every webinar, or even when I'm here at home, I do these these nature trails on the beach, just to basically have that awareness. So we really need to have greater awareness on, firstly, what is the coast, because it's not how a forest works, or it's not just a piece of land the way you would have in a terrestrial space. A coast is very different and it's very dynamic. Like during low tide, you have more land available, and during high tide, you have less land available. And so we need to understand this, this amazing quality of it, to understand how do we sustainably develop, and how do we also protect it, basically. And this happens when you involve people who know about it. So who are the people who would know the coast like 100%? They would be the best people to know about it. It would probably be the fishers, the small scale fishers, the tribal fishers. And so they have lived here since years and years. And so including them as coastal representatives to probably take us on a nature trail like this, telling us what is the coast or what is their relationship with the coast, or some stories where they've seen a sea turtle or they've seen a whale shark. Those are the things that we need to know so that we understand what a coastline is, what a coast is. And so this can be translated into sustainable and participatory coastal tourism, where when you're coming to a coast, you decide to, give in, say, 2 hours part of your vacation time into planting some mangroves or into cleaning the beach. And so this can translate into those sort of things. It does not have to be just, going and relaxing and sleeping. It can be fun. It can be other things, new things that you probably did not see. And so policy and welfare programs also by coastal state governments for raising this awareness, where they have fun, in fun activities to do on the coast, fun activities to sort of go and do. Probably one of the things we worked with the Goa Forest Department, which is a state department here, was collecting the waste on a turtle nesting beach. And getting it and making actual turtles of it. And then we decided which group made the best turtle, and we gave them a very, very, very cool prize. So that's probably one of the things that we can do. And so I'm almost done with my listing, and I will give it now to Kali. The conclusion is basically to build resilience, we require design. When you're adult or only when you're into research, it can be inspired from anything. So whatever inspires you to think that this design or this architectural innovation could help the coastline be more resilient is what we require right now, what the coast requires right now. We need nature-based solutions and protecting existing natural buffer zones. So you have your mangroves, you have your coral reefs, you have your seagrass bed, you have your rocky shores, and you go and you be like, I think we should protect them because they do an excellent job when it comes to protecting us when cyclones come, and with climate change, the recurring amount of cyclones that will come. And we need inclusive governance approaches where we talk to these communities that have lived on the coastline, that live their livelihoods, their bread and butter based on the coastline. We talk to them and we ask them, what are your stories and how have you been so resilient, and could you tell us more? And so just ending with that, yeah, thank you so much. And
if everyone can please switch on their videos, that would be great. And please ask any questions that you have for Sarita. And yeah, so everybody please switch on your videos. Thank you.
There was an observation in the chat that Maharashtra was the only state to win awards related to climate change. That was made by Rishikesh. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for that. Leave any questions you have in the chat. We will definitely address them in the Q&A session. If not, we can move on with Carly's presentation.
I think in the meantime, Sarita can maybe take one of the questions that have come up.
yeah. Could you read them out so that I'm in sync, I think, with it?
Yeah. So there is one that was originally asked by Ashita. If you want to ask it on your own, feel free. The question reads, do you want to ask it on your own? Okay, I'll take that as a no. The question reads,
no, Ashita, please speak up. You can switch on your mic and ask a question.
Is this that as we are a student, can we do anything to protect the coastal lines?
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of non-profits in every coastal state, and they keep having plantation and cleanup drives. And I think these two things we think, are not important, but I think these are very important. And the schools are actually we've observed like in the number of years we've been doing this, the impact it has on children, and how these children who've actually participated in cleanup drives or in plantations or even just nature trails, like, when somebody's organizing it, whether it's a government department or the school or a non-profit, these children actually tend to choose careers that are towards technology, innovation, and just creativity. So I think this is what you can do as school children at this age. Just go and learn about your course through these options that you have.
And there's one more question from Tanish saying, actually, yeah, Tanish, please switch on your mic and your camera and you can ask a question.
Ma'am, can we control on cyclones, or can we prevent from anything that cyclones will not come?
No, we can't prevent the cyclones from not coming, but we can, sorry, as you've seen, but we can work on how we make ourselves stronger in embracing its impact. We cannot stop a cyclone per se. It is a natural process like rain. And seasons, so it happens seasonally, and a lot of factors are related. One of the things pushing it is unfortunately climate change. So with climate change and with more higher temperatures, India is going to see much more number of cyclones, and other parts of the world too. So no, we can't prevent cyclones, but we can work towards, as what I spoke about now, in building resilience and understanding who are our best friends and who are our friends in this, which is nature essentially, and the barriers and the excellent job they do at protecting us from these cyclones recurring that will start happening again and again now. And protect them and find innovation where we can build our infrastructure much more better with more better technology, which does not have to use concrete over these nature-based barriers, and can still do the work. So I think that is what we require. We require innovation and the awareness of what nature-based solutions or what nature does to us or gives back to us in times of a cyclone. I think Vivek has a question. The Mumbai coastal can be a whole other discussion. Can you make comments on that? Vivek, I did not understand. Mumbai coastline, you mean? Okay. So Mumbai's coastline is basically it's the Deccan Plateau. So the entire coastline is mostly a rocky shore. And it's rocky because millions of years ago, about like 65 to 68 million years ago, you had like lava coming out and outcropping into the entire region, and that solidified, and that became essentially a Deccan Plateau. And so the Deccan Plateau is full of rocky shores and it has amazing creatures in them, but it does an excellent job at protecting you when there's a cyclone coming to the city of Mumbai. And so that is what it does, and that is how important it is to recognize that this rock, which we think, has like some foul smell or we can't go to the water easily, it is actually there as your best friend protecting you from the next flood coming to your city. So that's Mumbai's coastline. It's very dynamic and it's wonderful. And it has made the city what it is today, like the shape of the coastline and everything. So we need to protect that too. Ashman, I think, has a question, which is what kind of buildings we should build or what kind of architecture design for preventing from cyclones? That's an excellent question. So we don't have a foolproof design mandate per se on a cyclone proof building. We do have these mandates or these or established studies on earthquake proof buildings though. So I think there's still a lot of work being done on how can we make infrastructure building cyclone proof or safe from coastal disasters. And I think India is very much working on that, but I think that is something that that we still need to work on. But essentially, like what we've got, like with the architects that we speak to, is basically build your infrastructure, build your buildings a little behind these natural flood protection barriers, and build them with sustainable material that isn't like going to disseminate the coast. So that is the type of architecture design we can use. And I think I will hand over to Kali now, and she will tell us a bit about her work and amazing stuff about that. And we'll take questions later. Over to you, Kali.
Hello, everybody, and a special welcome to all of our youth guests. My name is Carly Lovis. I am a marine ecologist in New York City in the United States. And I'm going to be talking to you all a little bit about monsoons in Mumbai. So how many of you are in Mumbai?
Can everybody please raise their hand if they are in Mumbai?
Okay, so it seems like a good bit of you from the region. So you'll have some understanding, hopefully, of all of this. So initially, this was a survey that was designed for one of my classes here in New York City, where I wanted to explore kind of the youth perspective of flooding in Mumbai, and whether or not climate change is making it worse. So as most of you probably already know, the west coast of India is subject to the Arabian Sea branch of the Southwest Asian monsoon track. So that means every year, the west coast of India gets smacked, more or less, by these big monsoons. And currently with climate change trends, we're seeing that the season of monsoons is lasting longer and starting later. So there's not anything really to break the heat. It's pretty uncomfortable, I would imagine. So when we talk about extreme flooding in the city, we often compare it to this flood that happened in 2005. The 26th July floods, which I'm sure predates a lot of the younger people in our audience today. But maybe your parents, or if you have any siblings, remember this flood. So what I did for this project was design a survey, which was sent out over the internet via 2 Instagram accounts. Talk Darty to Me, which is the one that is so graciously hosting this event, and South Bombay Memes for Class Riddled Teens, which is a meme page run by our lovely Nivedita, which basically, it was intended to reach out specifically to the youth demographic, and to get their perspective on this issue. So the first question, or as you would expect, most of the respondents, most of the people who took this survey were young. 88% of them were under the age of 30. We had a few people, parents, respond to the survey, and most people lived in India as well. So the first question that I asked in this survey was, do you remember this flood? And if so, can you describe it? And here are just 3 of some of the responses that I got. And most of them were, I think, pretty descriptive of a very, very bad flood. So catastrophic, complete breakdown of everything in the city, everything underwater. Our very own Ajay talked about being trapped at school for a very long time, couldn't get home, and was separated from his family for most of the day. And then the next question that I asked is, do you think another flood of similar magnitude, so as big and as catastrophic as this 2005 flood, will happen in your lifetime? And then I asked, do you think climate change is impacting your life? And do you think climate change is making floods worse? Because it was important to me to put into perspective just the immediate consequences, because a lot of people don't fully understand climate change, or they don't really think that it's a thing. So I wanted first flood, your perspective on the flood, and then whether or not you think climate change is happening. And most of the people said yes, they think that floods are getting worse and that there will be another flood like this flood in their lifetime. And only a small few said maybe. And I think it's really important to note that no one said no. So all 25 of the respondents think that in some way that the floods in Mumbai are going to get worse. Then the next question I asked, which was my favorite, based on all of the responses I got, is, do you think the city of Mumbai can handle another flood of similar magnitude? And all of the answers were some kind of no. As you can see here on the screen, we have a no, a maybe, an absolutely not, a no, not at all. And very much kind of painted this picture of pessimism and dismay and maybe a little bit of anger towards the BMC. And again, a lot of these responses came back to this recurring theme of just too much development and land reclamation in the city. Old infrastructure, so old buildings, old roads, old trains, and a government that doesn't really care. So as most of you know, the BMC is the governing civic body of Mumbai, and they're very, very pro-development. So an example of this that some of you might be familiar with is the Coastal Road Project, which has taken up a lot of land reclamation and has displaced a lot of the fishing communities, the indigenous fishing communities along the coast. And further, these kinds of projects widen the divide of inequity within the city. So then I also wanted to get a brief kind of perspective of what people thought of the BMC and their projects, and if they're really accounting for the changes that we're seeing in the environment from climate change. And I was kind of surprised by these results. Given the previous responses, I would have thought that most people didn't think that the government would take these things into account. But there were a small percentage of them who do. And then I wanted to gauge how people thought the city could adapt and think perhaps a bit more optimistically about Mumbai in the changing climate. And all of the responses kind of followed some of these three themes here, all of which Sarita had touched on in her presentation. Resilient infrastructure, so updating drainage and things that help get the flood water out when it comes. Nature-based solutions like mangroves that help storm break and also retain water, and community action, so people working together to be ready for these kinds of events and also respond and adapt. That being said, I wanted to end the survey on a more positive note. So I asked if people were optimistic about Mumbai being able to adapt to a changing climate. And sadly, most people are not. And I think that's really where the youth demographic comes in, because they're the people that are going to have to take over and have to sort of change this outlook and really prepare the city for the changing climate. All right. So the likelihood of a similar magnitude flood doubles within the next 50 years. And the associated costs and economic losses from the damage of such a flood triples. And this further drives inequity within the city of Mumbai. So looking to the future, the BMC really has the capacity for these kinds of infrastructure projects that can be both revenue generating, so making money, which is what the city wants, and still serving the best interest of the public. And that really is you all as youth, and as you grow up and move into the professional world, really doing these kinds of projects in your careers to help build coastal resiliency in Mumbai and throughout India.
Thank you, Carly. Sorry for the interruption. Yeah, over to you, Ajay.
So yeah, questions. Feel free to raise your hand. I think because there's way too many people, it's gonna get really chaotic. So I would like you can ask questions in the chat, but I would encourage you raise your hand, and you can like switch on your video and mic and ask it so that it's more personal and interactive. So yeah, does anyone have any questions? If not, we can look at the questions which were there before Carly presented. Nikunj, go ahead.
Yes, sir. I want to know about that. Is there any system from which we can know about the coming cyclone or flood? Means that how it is powerful or any other thing?
Yes, absolutely. There's many scientists across the world, not just in India, but in the United States, in Europe, and in Eastern Africa, that monitor these kinds of storms and flood events. And there is some warning system in place. As the science gets better, we can predict these things a little bit better. So it's easy. It gives us more time to prepare for these incoming storms.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, sir. Hello.
And please raise your hand if you have a question, because I think Ashman had raised their hand, and so I'd encourage them to ask the question themselves.
I'm asking that cutting trees may also lead to floods or make that more worsen.
Yes, cutting off trees or anything on the coastline will make everything worse, because the roots of the trees also act, as one of, not a direct way, but like in a progressive way, the flood protection barrier. So yes, it would worsen climate change, floods, especially if you're living in a coastal city. Which is why the Sanjay Gandhi National Park in Mumbai, people who are living in Mumbai, is very important, because it hosts that entire huge forest, which holds in and also produces a lot of the fresh water that we consume in the city. And in other parts also, wherever there's a forest, there's a good, there is fresh water and good quality of water. And just adding on the Kali's thing, in India, it's the IMD that gives you forecasts for cyclones, and they send you alerts. So if you are working on the coast, if you're a fisher, if you have some sector, they'll send you an SMS saying that there's a cyclone warning. So come back from the coast for this number of days or hours.
But increasing population can also increasing population can we have to deforestation is important now, as population increasing day by day. So how it's possible to plant trees and control floods?
So that is again where we require innovation, because there are ways that other countries like Netherlands, I think in some way that even New York City is looking at building infrastructure that includes more plantation of trees. So without having to cut down trees, they are trying to build infrastructure now, which does not involve this. So it also comes down to planning. So if we have better architects and better trained people in this domain, in the climate innovation domain, who help us in planning and saying that if we cut down trees in this area, it is going to increase flooding of the area, and so we can change the location, or
That
we
is
can find a better way to do it. So those are ways, and we have
plan
to again look
structure
at
maybe.
innovation. Pardon?
Okay. Plan. You are saying that plan structure can help in this.
Yes, it can. Yes, because in other countries and even other states in India, like you see the northeastern states, they have a very planned version of the way they develop infrastructure, and we see how that is so beneficial to, when storms and hazards come, and how resilient this infrastructure is for their communities and their cities.
Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Right. Yeah, everyone, please mute yourselves.
Blood
We have
कैसे हैं?
Yeah, please mute yourself, everyone. We have a question from Sahil. He's written in the chat, but I would invite him to come and ask it in person with this video and mic on. So Sahil, if you may.
Hello. I guess you can hear me now. Hi.
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't.
Thank you for this wonderful insights, Kalu, Sarita, both of you have been very insightful. This was good learning, and of course, being a resident of Navi Mumbai, being very close to the coast, I live almost a kilometer away from the coast. Given that it is exciting for Mumbai to have the coastal road come up, and it's going to be something which is going to drive a lot of discussions, and it has already started doing that. And I also understand from a sustainability perspective, as well as a marine biology perspective, that it is going to be a very harmful thing going ahead. So what I feel is there was a system of ferries that used to be in operations long ago. Now it is no more in operations, but going ahead, would there be any narrative in terms of alternatives for the coastal road that you could suggest? Or, of course, I do understand that coastal road is not serving the purpose that it is envisioned for. So, is there any alternative, or is there any way to kind of achieve the purpose and also not harm the marine, biology?
Sorry, I'm responding to people in the chat. Can you just briefly ask that again?
Ma'am,
Is there any alternative to the coastal road which will not harm the marine biology and also be sustainable?
Sorry,
sense?
I couldn't mute before.
Yeah, go
I'm so
ahead,
sorry.
Sarita.
No, I'm so sorry. Like I was talking to Ajay. Please, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think the ferry idea is quite interesting. Something that we discussed a lot in Takdardi and even prior to Takdardi, in our initial project with the coastal road, was really improving public transit, and trains and buses, and just electrifying, and also pushing for sort of more societal acceptance of public transit, because there's sort of this stigma around using it, and just because it's cost effective, it can be electrified in a way that kind of is somewhat emissions neutral, and then also it just increases mobility within the city, and can be a tool to promote equity as well.
Hi, Sahil. So we had made an actual report on what are the things you can do instead of building a coastal road. And we actually looked at the metro that's being built, like parallel to the coastal road, and we also spoke about how this is pretty much going to solve a lot of the congestion issues because you're going to have public transportation available. We had suggested ferry services, and even though the BMC wanted the road very adamantly, we suggested building that on stilts rather than reclaiming the portion, because it is scientifically proved that if you reclaim a portion, it will flood some portion of the city. And we are looking at Navi Mumbai because we had projected that most of the flooding would be diverted actually towards Navi Mumbai from the coastal road reclamation. So yes, we spoke about the metro. We spoke about the BST buses that Carly mentioned, and starting more electric buses, because the BST has proved to be a very functional lifeline of the city since a very long time. And we also spoke about ferry services, which are already happening in some parts of northern Mumbai, actually towards Borivali and Gorai and all. So yes, we had presented a lot of solutions, and it was even heard by the BMC. It was heard by the Chief Justice of the Bombay High Court, where we won the case, and the coastal road was like, the court was like, please find other ways to not build a road, but do something better, because we do love our coast. So there was a lot of work done on this, and still a lot of work being done on this. But unfortunately, like, some portion of the work got done because of the pandemic, and so we have to now look at Navi Mumbai into building resilience because of Mumbai's coastal road. So that's what's happening around that topic.
Understood. Thanks a lot to the both of you.
So I think that's all the time we have for the Q&A session. So we also have a gift planned for the speakers. So I'm going to share my screen. So we have planted a tree in your name. You should have gotten an email for this. This tree is planted as part of the project Enrich Biodiversity in Maharashtra. So you would have gotten an email with the QR code in your email. So yeah, that's for you. That says thanks for coming to our event and speaking. And maybe I would like to ask all the children here to switch on their mics and say thank you to our speakers for taking the time and coming and speaking at our event. So if you could please say thanks to the speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
ma'am. Thank you,
I
ma'am.
think,
Thank you, ma'am.
I think you can take Manat's question in the chat box, and we can probably reply to him later since we're out of time. I think he raised his hand
Yeah, I did.
for a while.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you all once again for coming. It was a really nice session and it was really great to have such active participation from all of you in the audience and also from the speakers. And we would end the webinar now. Thank you all for coming once again, and see you next time. Bye.